Hello, everybody. Hello. I've got the toughest job is just to introduce Scott, and then I sit down. So my name's Mark. I work for Payco. We have a booth here, booth 200. We're in structures, so if you're interested in structural systems, you can come see us. So I just spoke with Scott a little bit, and I already got insight on our sales team and how we should manage it, so I'm sure you'll get plenty of insight. So the title of his presentation, Getting the Right People in the Right Seat. And Scott is with Bytown Ventures, a C-level advisory firm.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I just want to get things started with a quick admission, and this is something that I struggle with from time to time, especially when I'm in front of an audience like this. I'm a big believer in situational credibility, so the idea that if I'm going to give you some advice, and if you're listening to me, there needs to be sort of this feeling that this person's been in my shoes before, right? And understands what I'm up against. And in terms of the construction industry, just being open and honest, I don't have any experience. At least from an executive perspective, when I got out of the military in 1988, I joined a company called Von Worden Associates as a lead sod layer. So I was one of the best sod layers that they had. And by virtue of the fact that I did not resign or quit, by the end of the summer I was driving the Bobcat. So that's my sort of tactical experience in the construction space. I have a son that did concrete forming for a couple of years. Key Foundations, I believe, was the name of the company. And he explained to me that one of the cool things about concrete, in order to establish credibility, is you need to be able to bounce your hammer off of the concrete floor and have it bounce up and catch, right? So that's something that I know about construction. And then the last thing, the second last thing, is I have a son that works for Tomlinson. Any Tomlinson folks here? So he's a project coordinator with Tomlinson. He's a civil engineer, or as he corrects me all the time, he's an engineer in training. He's not a civil engineer yet. He's got to get his PEng. So that's my experience. But I will tell you, I do rock Carhartts on the weekend. So hopefully that gives me a little bit of credibility. So just a little bit of background on me. I'm a former high-tech, primarily sales leader. I was a VP of sales for a number of startups. Over about 25 years. Startups are very dynamic, fast-growing environments. Within 3 to 5 years, something happens. There's either an acquisition or you're smoking hole in the ground. So I think I worked for a total of, and I didn't move around a lot voluntarily, but I think I worked for a total of 7 or 8 companies through that career. Near the end, I was a CEO by virtue of the fact that the founder that I was working with wanted to retire, so I took over a business that was bleeding cash. We had about 50 employees, and the company was not profitable. It had been around for a long period of time. And so the first thing that I did, being in over my head, because I was I picked up a bunch of books, and I started reading them. And one of the books that I picked up was a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, which spoke to every business out there really has 4 elements that they need to work on. So people, strategy, execution, and cash. And so I took the book and I took it inside my company, and within a couple of years, I was able to at least get the company back to profitability before moving on, and then I got into some consulting work. Fast forward maybe a year or 2 afterwards, I was doing some go-to-market advisory, I was doing some executive coaching, and I sat through something called the Level 10 meeting, which is something that you might hear about a little bit today, but it's a tactical execution component of the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. And EOS, while I'm not going to go too deep on EOS today, quite simply, the definition of EOS, if someone were to ask me at a cocktail party, EOS is a set of simple, practical tools that will help you run your business. And we're going to go a little deeper on the people component today. Before we do that, though, I just want to get a show of hands. Could I get a show of hands of people within the room that are either owners or on the senior leadership team of their construction companies? Okay, keep your hands up if you could. Gives me an idea of who's in the room. Okay, now the folks, actually, sorry, keep your hands up. I just want to do a quick cross-section here. Folks that maybe aren't on the senior leadership team, but they have at least one direct report. So they've got someone reporting into them, and then also they aspire to be in a leadership position within the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, now you can bring your hands down. Last question, do we have anyone here that has HR in their title, Director of HR, Manager of HR, VP of HR? Okay, so 1, 2. Okay, thank you. That gives me an idea. 3. So the presentation today will be for the first 2 group of people. The third group of people, I hope, will appreciate some of the things that I bring to the table through this system. This will complement maybe some initiatives that HR is working with you on. So that gives me a feel. Now, in terms of setting the stage for this particular presentation, what we put in the prospectus, I think what we said was, are you experiencing people challenges within your organization, and you just can't quite put your finger on what the issue is, what the challenge is? And so if you came to the presentation for that reason, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you a set of simple, practical tools that ideally will help you identify what the issue might be. And then outside of that, we're going to be going deep on some things like core values. We're going to go deep on things like trust, that type of thing, in the short period of time that we have with each other this morning. So in terms of the EOS model, I'm not going to go too deep on it today, but there are 6 key components. So the concept, the philosophy behind the entrepreneurial operating system is that every business, I don't care what business you're in, so you could be in construction, you could be in high tech, you could be in life sciences, you could be in the fabrication, manufacturing business, and I've got clients that I work with in all of these types of industries. There are really only 6 key components to your business. So the first component is vision. So how clear is your vision for the organization from the senior leadership team on down with regards to where you're going and how you're going to get there? So if that vision is super clear, and if everyone understands the vision, that's essentially 100% strong. Now, no organization is perfect, but that's ultimately where we want to get you. The next key component is data. So do you run your business on metrics? Do you have some scorecard items that you look at on a weekly or monthly basis that remove ego and gut feel from your decision-making process and give you a bit of a pulse on the business, whether or not the business is on track or not? So that's the data component. We're not going to talk too much about that today. People, which we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive. So do you have the right people? And I'm going to define that for you this morning. In the right seats. So if you have all the right people in the right seats, that's 100% strong. Issues is all about identifying and being really disciplined as an organization, as a leadership team, and then ultimately as the organization flows departmentally. Are you able to identify short and long-term issues, so things that are tripping you up as a company, or opportunities that you're just not able to execute on? So issues has this negative connotation, but sometimes it's a merger or acquisition or something cool that you want to do, but your day-to-day is just kind of taking over and you're never able to get that done. So how good are you at identifying short and long-term issues, and then how good are you at getting to the root cause of those shorter long-term issues? Because often an issue is more of a symptom. You want to drill down and get to the root of that. So that's the issues component. Process is just about documenting your core processes, and I'm not talking about SOPs. I'm not talking about how you run the tractor or how you do this or how you do that. But do you have an HR process? Do you have a marketing process? Do you have a sales process? Do you have a couple of operations processes? And then do you have those processes documented, the 20% that gets 80% of those processes done? And then are they followed consistently by people within your organization? Because that really is the only way you can scale a business. And then traction, which ironically is part of the thing that attracted me to the system, was a level 10 meeting. It's just the concept of meeting weekly as a leadership team going through a scorecard, going through your 90-day goals, or what we call ROCs, going through employee and customer headlines, and then also meeting on a quarterly basis. So those are the 6 key components of EOS. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about people. And from a people perspective, I just want to read an excerpt here from a book. The book is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Has anyone heard of Patrick Lencioni? Quick show of hands. Okay, so this is a fairly well-read book. I think there's over 2 or 3 million copies sold, probably a little bit more. And in the book, Patrick introduces us to the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I'm going to get into the 5 dysfunctions of a team a little bit later on in the presentation, but just close your eyes and listen to this. So, not finance, not strategy, not technology, it's teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, both because it's so powerful and so rare. A friend of mine, the founder of a large, successful company, best expressed the power of teamwork when he once told me, if you could get all the people in an organization rowing in the same direction, you could dominate any industry in any market against any competition at any time. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about right people, right seats. What we want to do is we want to get human energy within your organization all pointed in the same direction. And we do that. We have a bit of a science behind that. It's a simple science. But the next thing that I want to do is I want to share with you a concept that has just been outlined in a book that has just come out a couple weeks ago. It's a book called People, and it's part of the EOS library. And the concept is intentional culture. So within this particular concept, I'd like you to think about your business. I'd like you to think about your organization and the history of the organization, where it's been, and then ultimately where you are today. And I'd like you to think about if any of these categories fit you, right? And so the very first thing that we're going to talk about is a culture that is high in intention, but it's not the healthiest, okay? So we call that a command and control culture, and I was very guilty of running command and control cultures as a VP of sales for high-tech startups. It was very regimented. There was an element of micromanagement, but it actually worked for us because we had to get stuff done. We had venture capital people that had just given us money that wanted to see results, and we had competition that were all swarming into a particular area, and we needed to execute. But the challenge with a command and control culture is over a period of time, it's not the healthiest, right? And so over, let's say, a 2 to 3 year period, you're going to have high turnover. You're going to have people churning through your organization. You're going to have, a culture of quasi-fear, quasi-intimidation. And so it's very difficult to scale a command and control type organization. The next one that I want to talk to you about is the culture that we call the happy accident culture. And this is a scenario that is quite healthy in that you've got a leadership team and extended people within the company that are quite happy. They trust each other. They really enjoy working with each other. It's not so intentional. It's just happened. And the reason why it's happened often, and I was working with a company a couple of weeks ago out of Kingston, is they were all buddies. They were all Div 1 NCAA golf players. They all went to the same school. They all happened to be from Kingston. Not all of them, 3 of the 5 of the senior leadership team. And one was an accountant and one was more of a visionary. And so they work really well together. They trust each other, same age, same demographic, young families, you name it. And we also see this sometimes in family organizations where you've got family members that trust each other, that have each other's back, and so on and so forth. The challenge with a happy accident culture, super healthy, not so intentional, is it ends up becoming very difficult to bring people into that organization because it's kind of a clique, right? And so you got to be very careful when you've got a happy accident. Be grateful for that happy accident. But if you're going to grow and scale your business, and really, frankly, that's we have a philosophy when we teach EOS, it's grow or die, and it's not greed growth. It's like if you're not growing, you're not, like that. We believe growth is, you always got to be growing, right? So if you're going to scale your business, you want to be careful of the happy accident, right? The next one is chaotic culture. So not so healthy, not so intentional. And I don't need to give you too many examples. Most of the people, when I talk to them about this type of culture, they get it. They've been there. This is sometimes a scenario where you got an owner-operator that's grown the business, and there's not a lot of delegation going on, but there's a fair amount of intimidation, so on and so forth. Or maybe they're just quite chaotic by virtue of the fact that they are a visionary leader and they don't have that integrator, that operator that helps bring things down, right? So that's not where you want to be. That's very difficult culture to grow. So what I want to talk to you about this morning is something called an intentional culture. Now, I do have a couple of people books that I've brought. We really unpack it in this book, but I just want to give you some highlights on it. So, intentional cultures, once you have an intentional culture, you're going to operate with an abundance mindset. And it's a journey, right? So you're always going to be, you might start out moving from chaotic just to the sort of lower left quadrant of intentional, but you're always going to want to strive to get to the top right. So you're never really done from an intentional culture perspective. But once you're kind of in the middle of that square, what we see anyways is organizations operate with an abundance mindset as opposed to a scarcity mindset. And this is something that's bred into us from an early age, right? Scarcity, competition. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be competitive with your competitors, but just the philosophy that all boats fundamentally do end up rising with the tide, especially internally, right? These intentional cultures will have that abundance mindset. They operate, the term love comes up often when we describe these types of cultures. They truly love each other, right? They believe in the greater good of their company. So every decision that they make does not have a career preservation necessarily associated with it. The decision has to be made for the greater good of the company. And they have their people act as their best recruiters. So once you've got an intentional culture in place that's based on core values, there's a saying out there, right? If you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything, right? And so that's fundamentally what core values are. And so we're going to talk a little bit about core values next as we kind of move through this syllabus. So how do we create an intentional culture? Step one. So it starts with core values. So core values, can I just get a quick show of hands? Who here, and keep your hands up as I continue to ask the questions. Who here understands or has heard of the concept of core values within a company environment? Okay, so keep your hand up if you have core values within your company. Okay, so keep your hand up if those core values are understood by everyone within the organization, from the senior leadership team right on down to the person that sweeps the floor. Okay, and I'm seeing some of the hands go down, and that's normal, and that's kind of what happens, right? Is there anyone here, and I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but is there anyone here that could volunteer or recite their core values? Would feel comfortable? By all means, and your name?
Stephanie.
Stephanie?
We just updated ours, so
Okay.
I think I can do it. Drive for excellence, trusted for innovation, committed to smiles, success through synergy, something about leadership. Can't do it. We have another one, so no, I can't.
That's awesome. Hey, listen, that was great. Thank you for being brave. And Stephanie, I've got a book for you here. So I want to give you one of the people books. That's awesome. Now, let's be open and honest here. How many people think core values are hokey, kind of hokey? Anyone going to be open and honest? All right. So I'm going to admit that I was guilty of that for a lot of my career. I just wanted to share this passage from the book that I thought was kind of cool. I was actually sitting across. So my military career was 2 years in length. I tried to fly airplanes. They took the keys away from me. It was in the 1980s. I have a lot of respect and admiration for military folks, especially combat veterans. And I was sitting across the table from an EOS implementer a couple of weeks ago in Dallas. And he said, yeah, you know that new people book? They asked me to sort of comment on core values. I said, oh, yeah, what'd you do? I was a tank driver. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was a drill sergeant, and so on and so forth. And I found his passage just as I was prepping for this presentation. I just wanted to share this with you, right? Just bear with me as I go through this. So for anyone who doubts the power of core values, many business leaders will roll their eyes at the concept of core values, and they're right to do so, as countless organizations have announced their fancy vision and mission statement and new values only to immediately relegate them to an obscure spot on their website and never speak of them again. Or worse, state the organization's core values but then fail to create a culture of leadership that lives up to it. It's no wonder that many are cynical about core values and see them as fluffy, meaningless wastes of time and money that aren't relevant to real business and leadership. But there's an organization that proves this wrong and demonstrates that core values need to be a critical component to creating a world-class organization. You just have to do it the right way. As a former drill sergeant in the U.S. Army, I've seen it firsthand. The Army is nearly 250 years old, has over 1 million soldiers, and is the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen. From day one of boot camp, soldiers are taught the history of the Army, its core values, and the soldier's creed. They're expected to memorize them, live them, and enforce it with their team. Drill sergeants speak of core values routinely to develop the culture of the team and set an example of what being a U.S. Army soldier looks like. The Army's core values are loyalty, duty, respect, selfless, service, honor, integrity, and personal courage, which form a nice acronym, leadership. These values shape the Army's onboarding experience, boot camp, in every way and are infused into physical training, personal development, marksmanship, drill, and ceremonial events. They're also an essential part of every major milestone of a soldier's leadership development throughout their career. For every promotion, award, and quarterly and annual evaluation, values serve as an anchor for those conversations and decisions. Violations of the Army's core values aren't tolerated at any level, and that's what makes the culture of the Army so strong. This shared set of values is what allows teams and leaders from anywhere in the Army to come together easily and work as a team regardless of geography, functional area, and position. It's also what shapes soldiers' actions and leadership in times of incredible stress and fear, such as combat. For anyone who doubts the power of core values, you need to commit to them and create a culture that leads your team to live them out. Only then can you experience their power. So I thought that was kind of cool. I wanted to share that with you guys. A couple things on core values. If you have core values, great. If you don't have core values, or if you want to dust off your core values and maybe go through another exercise on developing your core values, know that if you've been in business for 3 to 5 years, you have core values. They just may not be on your wall, right? Like they exist within your organization. You just need to flush them out. And I want to walk you through how I would facilitate that if I'm working with an organization. So you already have core values, whether you're overt about them or not. And Enron's a bad example. So I just want to speak to that real quickly. Enron actually operated, there were a bunch of very highly trained academic leaders within that company, and they bought in and paid lip service to all of the things I'm going to talk to you about this morning. And they had core values, and guess what? 3 of their 4 core values had to do with honesty, integrity, and honor. And they didn't live or breathe any of those things, right? And so you want to identify core values that are who you are, and you got to live and breathe them. So I always like to share that story with folks. So what are core values, again, sort of defined? They're a small set of essential and timeless guiding principles. 3 to 7 is the rule, less is more. The Army core value, I love that story, but actually, in my opinion, my humble professional opinion, too many core values there, right? So 3 to 7 is the rule, less is more. They are what define your culture and what make you unique. The 5 core values that you've identified, or 6, or whatever the number is, when they're all stacked one on top of each other, there's no other company out there that should have that DNA. And you don't need to go and test that, but I guarantee you that will probably be true if you do the exercise truthfully. They attract the right people to your organization. They repel the wrong ones. And you got to use them to hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize your folks. And to the story's comment there, every personal review that occurs in the military, in the U.S. Army, they start off with a core value alignment discussion. Now, you got to be careful of a couple of traps. There are traps that organizations fall into when they're developing their core values. So you don't want to have accidental core values. So accidental core values is when you look down on your organization and you think about kind of what brought you to the dance, right? So in the high-tech community that I used to be a part of, there was a company called Digital. They were out in Canada. And they ended up getting bought by HP, I think. But long story short, they started out, they had that classic story coming from a garage in Boston to building up. By the time I started working with them, there were about 20, 30,000 employees. And one of their core values was whatever it takes, right? And the challenge with that core value is that's kind of what brought them to the dance. But now they're a 30,000 employee company. And that whatever it takes mentality, especially when you're dealing with the federal government and large contractors, you're kind of skipping steps, right? You're instilling within your culture that it's okay to skip these steps because we're going to do whatever it takes to make you successful, right? So just be careful of the accidental core values. Aspirational, that's another value trap that organizations run into. This is where the CEO passive-aggressively tells their people what they should be, right? And so you got to be very careful of that, right? We had a core value at a tech company I used to work for. It was the difference between mediocrity and excellence is attention to detail. So attention to detail was a core value. Yet our CEO paid zero attention to detail, and we knew the reason why he had that up on the wall is because we made a bunch of errors in configuring computers that year. And we lost some business, right? So be careful. You don't want to be aspirational with your core values. And then permission to play, that's another values trap that companies sometimes run into. And I'm going to pick on honor, integrity, ethics. Those are ones that could very well be a core value for your organization. But more often than not, you wouldn't hire someone that doesn't have honor, integrity, or ethics. So that's an example of table stakes, permission to play for core values. Every now and then you will have a story within your history that speaks to honor and integrity, and it's a very important part of who you are. And then in that case, maybe that is a valid core value candidate. I have one company I work with. They started the company because they had a falling out with the previous business partner who was not operating with honor and integrity. So therefore, it made sense that that became a core value for their organization. So those are some value traps. Now, when I facilitate core values, here's what I do. So I get with the leadership team. So the leadership team is around the table, and you gotta, at least from our perspective, this is the way we do it. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but often we will get asked, should we not involve all of our employees in core values discussion? And our answer is, no, that's not the way we do it, but there's reasons why we don't do it that way, and I'll get into a couple of them real quick. I mean, you don't want it to become this 3 to 6 month project with lots of cycles. Maybe people weigh in, maybe people don't weigh in, then some people leave, right? So what you want to do is you want to gather the leadership team, and you get the leadership team around the table. So this is your founder, this is your general manager, this is your biz dev leader, this is your ops leader, this is your finance leader. Or however you're organized. And then as long as you've got a critical mass of, let's say, 10 plus employees, I will ask these individuals to identify for me privately 3 people within the organization that if they could clone them, they could take over the world, right? And so there's some fun there. They will identify the 3 people. Sometimes there's people mentioned more than once. Sometimes they can't think of 3 people. That's another issue. But I'll tell you, when that happens, 2 things happen. First of all, the workaround on that one is I say to them, hey, okay, if you can't think of 3, but you can think of 2, I'd like you to identify someone adjacent to your company, maybe working for a competitor or in your industry that you really admire, that if you could hire them, you feel that you could really make a difference, right? So add that person to the list. Now, if you can't think of anyone, right, we got some other things that we need to talk about. But who are the 3 people? We share those 3 people. We'll get them up on the whiteboard. We'll have people mention more than once or twice. And then we go through the next step, which is let's identify what makes them great. Let's get some descriptors on the whiteboard. And when we're doing whiteboard work, inevitably we'll have, let's say, 7 or 8 names here, multiple people mentioned more than once. And then the descriptors end up becoming, like, you end up with 30 or 40 descriptors of what makes these people great. Test those 5 core values against and this is the term that I use, our best employee. Now, that one's an easy one because usually that employee is sitting on the whiteboard and they've got a bunch of stars beside their name. And then the EOS pure way is worst employee, but I always like to say our most challenging employee, or an employee that we're having trouble with today, right? Nothing leaves this room. So we're going to put those people against those core values, and more often than not, it's a confirmation that there's a cultural misalignment with that challenging employee. But more on that to come when I get into the people analyzer. So that's how I facilitate core values. And generally speaking, we get 5 to 7 descriptors. There's always a little bit of wordsmithing that's required afterwards. But that's kind of how we do that. It's usually a 2 to 3 hour exercise. And it's much more compressed than involving the entire organization over an extended period of time. That's just kind of the way we do it. Now, again, potentially fatal, and we catch this through this facilitation exercise. When the leadership team, and specifically your visionary leader, your owner, your CEO, your founder, does not embody these values, that's a problem. It doesn't, and that means, frankly, that you got to eliminate that. Doesn't mean your CEO is out of a job. It does mean that core value is gone, right? So that is potentially fatal. So let's talk about, this is the first tool I want to socialize with you guys. It's a tool that we call the People Analyzer tool. It's a really simple tool. I'm going to walk you through it. Really simple example. So here we have 4 core values that we've identified. We've gone through the exercise, and we've identified humbly confident, serious without suits, of service, and be brave. So some of these core values are actually some companies I've worked with. I've cherry-picked 1 or 2. And the first one, actually, humbly confident, actually is a core value that we as EOS implementers have. And what that means is we need to be able to project to our client base, our customers, potential customers, that we know our stuff, but if we cannot come across as arrogant. If we come across as arrogant, it's just not who we are, right? So we need to project that we know our stuff, but we're not arrogant. So that's what humbly confident means to us, right? Serious without suits, that's one of my companies here in the Ottawa area. They are in the fabrication business. Actually, I don't think they'll mind me mentioning, they build signs. They do signs for our organizations. And essentially what they're getting at here is they're very professional within the shop floor, right? Of service, self-explanatory, but you can unpack that one and be brave. So here we have Sarah Brooksby, James Taylor, and JP Fortin. So if someone exhibits this core value most of the time, you give them a plus. If that individual exhibits the core value some of the time, we give it a plus minus. And then if that individual exhibits that core value rarely, you give it a minus. And the very first thing that you do as a leadership team is you subjectively, you look at your employees, you look at the folks that report into you, and you subjectively, you haven't even socialized these new core values with them yet. So you're not being fair to them, but you're just going to do this on your own. This is for you, right? So you're going to go down your employee list, you're going to grade them subjectively on whether or not you feel they exhibit these core values most of the time, some of the time, or rarely. And I guarantee you, when you go through this exercise, you will identify your challenge areas. And again, that does not mean the individual's out of a job, but it means you do need to go lead and manage that person. You need to socialize where they're falling short from a core value perspective. First, you need to let them know what the core value is. You need to let them know that they're falling short. And when you let them know that they're falling short, by the way, you got to give them 3 examples. Because if you don't give them 3 exampple, the first one they're just going to write off as a misunderstanding. The second one they're going to write off as a kind of a coincidence. But once you got those 3 examples, they're going to be listening to you. They're going to understand that this is real and you're having a real conversation with them, right? So in this scenario, we've got something called the bar. So within this company, this fictional company, we've got 4 core values. So in order for someone to be above the bar, they need to exhibit 2 of these core values most of the time, and they need to be able to exhibit, the balance some of the time. You can never have a minus. If you have a minus for any of these core values, you do need to go manage that person, right? So that is your sign that you need to go manage that person. And so that's what the People Analyzer tool is. And then from there, what you've got to do, so here are the steps. Subjective analysis of your people. They're not involved. It's not fair to them. Just do it for you. Okay. Next step is you need to start socializing your core values. So if we've got a visionary leader, a CEO, an owner, they need to get out there and they need to start beating the drum on the core values. And core values speech is something that it's a very simple concept, but you need to unpack. So you need to unpack each core value, and you need to be anecdotal. You need to give examples of a scenario in the last 2-3 weeks, or maybe even in the past, where someone's been brave. You need to name names in a positive sort of affirmational sense. You need to potentially describe the opposite of that core value. What is the opposite of that core value? You need to unpack that for your audience. Now, in that scenario, I don't recommend you mention names, but in that scenario, you do speak to the fact that this is not what this means, right? You should repeat this core value speech constantly, right? So we have this philosophy that good leadership, good management is like good parenting, and when you're parenting, you need to repeat things with your kids. You need to repeat them 7 times, right, until things start resonating. And so we believe that the core value speech should be delivered by the visionary leader at least once a quarter, and then you should embed it in your hiring process. So these are just some beginning steps from a core values perspective, and then, yes, get them on the walls. So these are some clients that I work with that have just recently put them on the walls. Anyone know the gentleman in the middle? So he's in your space, Spencer Wilson with SignFX. That's a sign company that I was talking about. I was in his office the other day and I said, do you mind me snapping a picture? But what's powerful about this is people start, through osmosis, they start understanding and realizing that this is who you are, this is why you exist, right? If you want to unpack the core values on the wall, so driven is a core value of peak sales recruiting, but then they unpack it there. Always improving is a core value of peak sales recruiting, but then they unpack it at work and in life. We are always humble, always learning, always improving. And so that is the next kind of logical step from a core values perspective. Now that's step 1 in creating an intentional culture. So step 1 is acknowledge your core values, dust off your core values, or create your core values from scratch if you haven't gone through the formal exercise. Step 2 is you want to make sure you have the right structure for your organization. Let me just do a time check here. So structure. Let's talk about the right structure for our organization. So we need to redefine our structure. What are our major functions? What are the roles and responsibilities for each function? And I'm going to start you off with this concept. This may not be super applicable to this conversation, so I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. Whenever I get together with a leadership team, especially a privately held organization that's perhaps like in your space, right? I always like to run them through just this concept. And the concept is there's 3 circles. So you've got owners, you got family, and you got the leadership team. And in many companies here in town, you will have people in all 3 circles, or you will have people in 2 of the circles. It all depends, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through a quick exercise, and what I'm getting at is I want to make sure that the company I'm working with knows that this is who I work with. I work with the leadership team. So if you're an owner and you're in Florida 6 months of the year and you don't really participate in the day-to-day business, but every now and then you'll go to, you'll be an ambassador for the company and you've got some long-term relationships. From my perspective, I'm going to put you in this bucket. You might be an active owner, like you might be a little bit more active than most, but I want to know who the day-to-day leadership team of this organization is. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build out your accountability chart, and the accountability chart is built out this way. So what are the major functions for your organization? Every organization, generically speaking, will have 3: sales and marketing, operations, finance. This is the function that attracts people to you and then consummates the deal with them. We've got the function that builds the widget, ships the widget, makes sure people like the widget. And then we've got the function that keeps track of the money, make sure you're not bending over your skis, that kind of thing, right? Now, every organization is different, and so you might have, when we build your accountability chart, We might call it BD, we might call it account management, we might have it demolition, excavation, environmental, and then we might have finance and admin. So every organization's a little different, but these are the primary functions. I want to know, do we have an ideas person that's leading the team? An ideas person, visionary leader. This is the individual, more often than not, that founded the company. They care deeply about culture. They are good at big relationships. But more often than not, the way they're wired is such that all of that stuff that they do there, they're not good at bringing that down and leading a team day to day, right? So then we get into the discussion on, do we have an ideas person, ideas leader, a visionary leader, and then do we also have an integrator, someone who can lead and manage accountability at the functional level? More often than not, that's your COO, that's your president, that's your general manager. But let's go through an exercise where we make sure that we've identified who those folks are. And it's very, very difficult for an organization to succeed if you've got a visionary leading the charge with no integrator. I'm telling you that right now, and those are the chaotic cultures. It is possible for an organization to succeed if they just have an integrator with no visionary. It is very possible, especially in traditional kind of businesses where there's nothing specifically like earth-shattering that's changing, not like, one company that is in the life sciences space that is into preserving kidneys, right? So you can run a business, but ideal scenario, you have a visionary and you have an integrator. They should have this symbiotic relationship where they feed off each other, right? They're the yin to each other's yang. That is the ideal scenario. There's a book called Rocket Fuel that gets into that, but we're not going to get into that today. So right seats. So the next thing, quick show of hands. How are you guys all for job descriptions? Everyone got job descriptions within their organization? Show of hands. Okay. So great. Job descriptions. This is not a job description. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify the roles, the primary roles and responsibilities for this particular function, and I'm going to challenge you to keep it 3 to 5. And if you need to spill into 6 or 7, that's fine, but we need to identify the primary roles and responsibilities of this particular function or sub-function. And what that's going to force you to do is net it out. You're going to net it out. And in this particular example, we've got operations with lead and manage accountability. That's just the term that we use for you need to lead your people if you've got more than one report. R&D, manufacturing, customer success, and logistics. So that is essentially roles and responsibilities. And the roles and responsibilities that you develop for each function and sub-function should never be in a vacuum. So you can't impose this on, if you've got an existing structure, existing organization, it's got to be a kind of a reciprocal two-way conversation where you gain agreement and alignment with the individual that's accountable for something on what they feel their top 3 to 7 roles and responsibilities are. And then you need to build out your organization. So you may have seen in the slide, I didn't emphasize it, the accountability chart is not an org chart. The accountability chart is just a simple way of looking at your business where we identify what the major functions are, what the primary roles and responsibilities are, and then we build it out to represent how you go to market, how you manage your customers. And then for each seat, operations in this example, here's how you measure your people, right? So you haven't really been able to put your finger on why someone can't get something done, right? So the first question is, are they a good cultural fit for your organization? Okay. They live and breathe their core values. The second question is, do they get their job? Do they want their job? And do they have the capacity to do their job? So GWC, that's the way we look at things, our overly simple way of looking at things, right? And so GWC, let me unpack that for you. So let me go back. Gets it is, let me start at the bottom. Capacity to do it, probably the most addressable. So this has to do with their experience, their education, and the time that they have. So do they have the capability, do they have the capacity to drive that forklift? And if they keep on driving the forklift into the boxes and wrecking your inventory, you have to ask yourself, have we trained them? Do they have enough education? And is forklifting like one of the 25 things that they do, and they just haven't been able to spend enough time on that, right? And so that's one way to look at your individual that's not performing, and you can assess whether it's something that you can address. The next one, moving up, do they want it? Do they want to do their job? Do they want to do that particular job? And that is probably one of the least addressable ones, but sometimes it's addressable in the sense that maybe you can take some things off their plate, and then that way they can be a little bit more enthusiastic about this thing over here. But I experienced this as a VP of sales in high tech. I reached a certain point where I just didn't want to do that job anymore. I'd been there, done that. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Yeah, I could accept my larger than average paycheck, but at the same time, I'd have a pistol to my temple every quarter in high tech, and it was live or die by the quarter, and investors saying one thing, but then doing another. And so I just got to the point where I didn't want to do the job anymore, right? And so you're going to find people within your organization that just don't want to do it, and then you got to be real with them, and they got to be real with you about whether or not they want to do that job. And then gets it, that's a little bit of black magic. That's just basically, do they have an instinct for this job, right? So gets it, wants it, capacity to do it. And so what you're going to do is you're going to complete the people analyzer now, and you're going to subjectively review your people on cultural alignment, and then you're going to ask yourself, do you feel that they get it? Do you feel that they want it? And do you feel that they have the capacity to do their job? And then going back to the initial question, and you know, if you read the syllabus and came here for this, the answer to this is, you know, someone's not working out within your organization and you just can't quite put your finger on it, right? The people analyzer tool should, not all the time, but it should bring things to light. And really there's only two types of people issues. This is kind of our overly simplistic way of looking at things. So you're going to have the right person in the wrong seat. That is the individual that lives and breathes your core value. They're a great company person. They would die for this company. You cut them and they're going to bleed marathon underground blood all over the place, right? But they're driving that forklift into the box every single day. So like they're not getting it done. And so if you have a right person in the wrong seat, if you're a for-profit organization, and we all are, you have to, over a period of time, if you can, you have to find that individual. Either you got to see if you can address maybe capability, because that's the most addressable, or you got to find that individual another job within your organization that maybe they're really well suited for. If you can't, you need to move on from that individual. You need to make the call and you need to move on. Now, I have an experience where this has worked out in the past. In high tech, we had an executive admin. She was great, overly enthusiastic, not the best executive admin though, in the sense that she wasn't getting stuff done for us. She was dropping balls left, right, and center, but she was a great company person. We moved her into sales, and within 3 years, she was at President's Club and she was out earning me, right? And so it's one of these scenarios where maybe someone who's a good company person just needs to be in another chair. But if that's not the case, then you got to move on. This one's the toughest. So wrong person, right seat. So this is the individual within your organization that you know is a challenge. Okay, I hate to use the term because I know it cuts close to home for people that are struggling with this, but I'm going to use the word, the expression cancer in the room, right? So you know there's a problem there, but damn it, they can get their job done. And again, my experience with this, I was a VP of sales. I would have salespeople working for me that were killing it. If I needed a number, if I needed a deal, they would bring it in, right? But guess what? They didn't share their leads. If they were working a trade show, and the second they were talking to someone that didn't fall within their territory, they turned away from them. They would badmouth the company every chance they got. They would badmouth the product every chance they got. It was all about them, them, them. You know, those people are killing in the back room, right? And so you got to be very, very diligent in identifying if you've got a wrong person in the right seat. And if you move on from this individual, it's a tough decision. It's one I recommend. What's going to happen is people are going to come into your office, close the door, and say, I can't believe it took you so long. Customers are going to stop you at the cocktail party at Christmas and say, yeah, you know what, we like doing business with the guy, but you know, we actually preferred, like, we were doing business with you, right? We weren't doing business with him, and we can see why he's gone, right? And so you'd be surprised at how that happens if you make these kind of courageous decisions with regards to cultural alignment. Now, we're running out of time. I just want to share a couple other things with you. I want to go back to 5 dysfunctions of a team. So this is just kind of like a bonus little thing. Hopefully there's value here that I want to share with you. But just a quick recap of what we talked about. So if you can't put your finger on why someone's not performing, ask yourself, are they the right person? So do they fit your core values? And then are they in the right seat? Do they have the capability to do their job? Now, going back to Lencioni's book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I want to share something with you. Has anyone heard of the Lencioni pyramid? Okay. Has anyone heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay, so in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what he talks about is in order for someone, the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. In order for someone to reach self-actualization, at the very bottom, they need their creature comforts taken care of, food, fire, shelter. So once food, fire, and shelter is taken care of, then they're going to move on up the pyramid, and the next one's safety. And then they're going to move on up. The next one's self-esteem, and then love, and then self-actualization. That's kind of the way that pyramid works. I think actually love comes before self-esteem. But this is a very similar concept. In order for organizations to really see results, you need to have trust. So trust is all about people knowing that they are loved, that they fit within the organization, and that they're appreciated. Sounds hokey, but that's really, really important. And they need to be able to trust you, and you need to be able to trust them. If you have trust within an organization, you are able to have good conflict. You actually want conflict within an organization. You want trust-based conflict. And what I'm getting at is you don't want a bunch of yes men or women just following along, right? If there's a better way to do something, you want that person speaking up. When you're in a leadership team meeting, you want good, healthy, professional debate to occur. And that's not going to occur if people feel like the second they get out of that meeting, they're going to get stabbed in the back, right? So you want trust in order to have good conflict, to make the right decisions for your company, in order to secure commitment, to move on these decisions. Ultimately, that will create accountability and results. And so I just wanted to share this with you because this was a bit of a light bulb moment for me as I went through this book, because I could think of many, many scenarios in the past where there wasn't a trust-based culture in place. And when you're looking to get trust in place, one of the challenges with trust is people don't hand out trust. Like, trust needs to be earned, right? So if you are looking to secure trust amongst your people, amongst your employees, I want you to think about these 4 hacks, if you will. Actually, only one of them is a hack, in my opinion. So credibility. The individual needs to believe you have situational credibility, and that's kind of why at the beginning I talked about, I'm not sure if I really have situational credibility in the construction space, but here goes, right? So credibility, they need to know that you could do their job and that you understand their job and understand the space. That's important. They need to know that you're reliable. They need to know that you're going to follow through on what you said you were going to do. They need to know that you're vulnerable. This one here is the hackable one. What I'm getting at is you can short circuit, you can be, the sooner you are vulnerable with your people, the better, and they will absolutely start folding into you, right? So do not be shy to be vulnerable with your people. You'd be surprised at how effective that can be. And then the last thing is they need to know you're not a narcissist, right? Self-orientation, that's the term that Charles Green used. But to the extent that they feel that you're all about you, they will trust you less. To the extent that they feel that you're all about the team, they will trust you more. So those are 4 things that you can think about if you're struggling with, I'm not sure if I have a high level of trust with my people. Think about those 4 factors and what you can do to improve those 4 factors. Okay, so we're right up on time. It's 9:30. There's something on the web I want to point you to. It's something called the Organizational Checkup. And so I just unpacked the people component of EOS. But if you want to take the Organizational Checkup, it'll give you an idea of where you stand on vision, people, data, process, issues, and traction. It'll give you a score. I encourage you to take it. I also encourage you to get a cross-section of your people to take it. And it'll be interesting. It's always interesting to see where you're strong and where you need to work. There's a platform out there that will help you manage this, and they're co-sponsoring this event, so they help me pay for some of the goodies and whatnot. So I want to just call attention to 90 software platform that will help you organize your EOS instance. And there's things like the people analyzer within that system, so that you can you manage that outside of spreadsheets. And just a recap on the EOS model, there's a tent card there on your chair. I'm running a breakfast workshop on May 3rd at the Brook Street, where I'm going to unpack the other 5 components. I'm going to try to anyways, in 90 minutes to an hour to 2 hours. But you're more than welcome. Please register, though. That workshop will fill up. We're just starting to promote it now. And with that, if there is time, I'd be happy to take any questions.